Antioch Quake. In late May 526 AD, one of the most devastating earthquakes of the ancient world struck the city of Antioch, then the bustling center of the Eastern Roman Empire. In just a few minutes, a thriving metropolis of hundreds of thousands of people was almost destroyed. According to modern estimates, around 250,000 people lost their lives, making it the deadliest earthquake recorded before modern times. Antioch lies near the tectonic boundary between the Arabian and Anatolian plates, part of the highly active Levantine fault zone. Pressure along faults such as the East Anatolian Fault and the Dead Sea Transform Fault has long made the area vulnerable to major earthquakes. In the 6th century, the city was the capital of the province of Syria, a populous and prosperous region within the Byzantine Empire. This was during the reign of Emperor Justin I and later Justinian I, both of whom were concerned with consolidating Orthodox Christianity within the empire. Antioch was not only an important trading center linking the Mediterranean to the east, but also one of the 5 major early Christian dioceses. With an estimated population of 200,000 to 300,000, it ranked as one of the largest cities in the ancient world. According to historians John Malalas and Procopius, the earthquake occurred in late May 526 and lasted for a few minutes, followed by aftershocks in the following days. Immediately after the initial shock, a massive fire broke out and spread rapidly throughout the city, engulfing what remained. Many people were not directly injured by the collapsing buildings, but were unable to escape and were trapped as the fire spread from there, resulting in their loss of life. At the time, the city was celebrating a major Christian festival, attracting pilgrims from the surrounding areas, which added to the casualties. Most of the major structures, including the cathedral, castle, central market, aqueduct, and residential areas, were destroyed. The historian John of Ephesus described the aftermath in disturbing detail. Badly burned remains were scattered throughout the rubble and were not intact enough to be buried. The consequences were catastrophic. More than 250,000 people are believed to have lost their lives, about a third of the city's total population. It was one of the deadliest disasters in recorded history. Infrastructure systems, from clean water and food to shelter and public safety, were paralyzed. In the aftermath of the disaster, outbreaks of disease, famine, and social disorder further compounded the crisis. Among the prominent figures affected was Patriarch Euphrasius, head of the Church of Antioch, who lost their life when the roof of his cathedral collapsed and the building burned down. His loss was deeply felt throughout the Eastern Christian community. Nearby cities such as Apamea and Seleucia were also affected by the aftershocks, disrupting trade and cultural exchange in the region. Hundreds of thousands of displaced people were left homeless. The disaster of 526 marked a turning point in the history of both Antioch and the wider Levant. Although Emperor Justinian I ordered reconstruction in 528, the city never fully regained its former status. Within a century, Antioch fell to the Persians and was eventually captured by Muslim forces. From a modern scientific perspective, the Antioch earthquake exemplifies the devastating interaction between seismic activity and subsequent fires, a pattern later seen in major disasters such as the Lisbon earthquake of 1755 and the San Francisco event of 1906. It also highlights the vulnerability of ancient urban centers to natural hazards, from flammable building materials and limited emergency infrastructure to overcrowding in crowded city centers. Contemporary Christian scholars often interpret the earthquake as a divine response to moral decay, a reflection of how natural events were viewed through a religious lens in the ancient world. Above all, the Antioch tragedy of 526 reminds us that, regardless of the era, human civilization has always faced unpredictable and uncontrollable challenges from the natural world. Today, the memory of the Antioch disaster is preserved through ancient manuscripts, religious records, and modern geological studies. In Antakya, modern-day Turkey, the successor city of ancient Antioch, many Byzantine ruins remain underground, inaccessible due to the rugged terrain and ongoing unrest in the area. Religiously, the disaster elevated the status of the Church of Constantinople, which took the lead in coordinating relief efforts and administration. It was also one of the earliest examples of a state-led disaster response in Byzantine history, laying the foundations for what would later evolve into the concept of the welfare state. Aleppo quake. On the morning of the 11th of October, 1138, a powerful earthquake struck the city of Aleppo, then a major cultural, political, and military center of the medieval Islamic world. In a matter of minutes, tens of thousands of lives were lost. Millions of buildings suffered structural collapse, and northern Syria was thrown into disorder. The disaster is considered one of the most devastating earthquakes ever recorded in human history, with historical sources estimating the number of people affected at between 20,000 and 230,000. The event took place against a backdrop of complex geopolitical concerns. At the time, Aleppo was under the rule of the Zengid dynasty, a powerful Sunni Muslim force led by Imad al-Din Zengi. This was a period of high tension between the Muslim states and the Crusader kingdoms, especially the Principality of Antioch, an entity established after the religious campaigns of the late 11th century. Geologically, Aleppo lies near the intersection of two major fault lines, the North Anatolian Fault and the Dead Sea Deformation Zone, a tectonic boundary between the Arabian and Anatolian plates that is known for its frequent seismic activity. The 1138 earthquake was just one in a series of earthquakes that lasted from October of that year to June of the following year, gradually moving northwest toward present-day Turkey. According to the historical accounts of the Arab historian Ibn al-Qalanisi and various Byzantine sources, the main earthquake struck early in the morning, while many residents were still asleep. The initial earthquakes caused the walls of Aleppo to collapse, destroying homes, markets, and many mosques, burying tens of thousands of people. The town of Harim, the garrison of the Zengid army, suffered heavy damage, with around 600 soldiers reported dead after the fortress collapsed completely. The neighboring towns of Athareb, Zardana, and Biza also suffered significant damage. Even some of the Crusader fortresses in the area were affected, albeit to a lesser extent. Ancient records describe the earthquake as sounding like thunder, possibly the sound of cracking rocks and collapsing structures. Aftershocks continued for days, causing further damage as survivors returned to search for loved ones and possessions. While medieval sources often exaggerate the scale of the tragedy, claiming up to 230,000 lives, modern estimates range from 20,000 to 60,000. Whatever the exact figure, it remains one of the most tragic events of the Middle Ages. Aleppo suffered heavy material and social losses. Administrative, religious, and civic structures were virtually wiped out. The city walls were destroyed, the water system was destroyed, ancient souks were buried, and residential areas were abandoned. Within weeks, public health conditions deteriorated and local outbreaks of disease began to spread. Hundreds of families were displaced, many fleeing to the countryside or even through Crusader-held territory, leading to an unusual wave of migration between rival territories. Politically, the disaster dealt a temporary blow to Zengid control. Important military outposts were damaged and the area's defenses weakened. However, Imad al-Din Zengi was quick to reassert control by rebuilding key fortifications and maintaining political power. The Crusader forces, on the other hand, were unable to capitalize on the situation due to their own losses. The earthquake spurred a wave of architectural reform across Syria and Mesopotamia, particularly in the strengthening of city walls and the use of more durable building materials. Culturally and spiritually, the 1138 earthquake left a deep impression on the people of the region. Religious figures from both the Muslim and Christian communities viewed the event as a punishment from God, a manifestation of God's wrath in response to greed, war, and prolonged conflict. These supernatural interpretations reflected a medieval worldview in which natural disasters were often seen as moral or spiritual warnings rather than physical phenomena. Although Aleppo gradually recovered throughout the 12th and 13th centuries, the trauma of the 1138 earthquake remained deeply imprinted in collective memory and religious cultural records. Many medieval historians, both Muslim and Christian, recorded the event as a divine punishment and a reminder of humility before nature. Furthermore, very little of the pre-1138 architecture survives, many having been destroyed in the earthquake or in subsequent conflicts. Some of the remains have been discovered in French archaeological excavations and are now recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today, the 1138 Aleppo earthquake remains an important subject of study in Middle Eastern seismology and urban history. Modern scientists study the event to better understand the fault system's Ganja quake. In the early hours of the 30th of September, 1139, a powerful earthquake struck the city of Ganja, in present-day Azerbaijan. With a magnitude estimated by modern geologists to be between 7.0 and 7.7 on the Richter scale, it is considered one of the most violent natural events ever recorded in the Gazakh region. Although medieval records do not provide an exact figure for the number of people lost their lives, some historical sources suggest that the number could have been in the tens of thousands. The city was almost completely destroyed in less than a minute, and it also led to a strange geological phenomenon: the formation of Lake Goygol, a deep, transparent lake that remains to this day as an important natural heritage of Azerbaijan. At the time, Ganja was an important economic, political, and religious center of the Shirvanshah Kingdom, an independent Muslim state located between two major empires, the Byzantines to the west and the Seljuks to the east. The city's strategic location made it a crossroads of trade and also a contested area between rival powers in the region. Geologically, Ganja lies on the Caucasus-Anatolian fault system, where the Arabian and Eurasian tectonic plates have been colliding and exerting pressure for centuries. In 1139, this pressure was suddenly released, creating a powerful tremor that rippled across the region. The earthquake struck while most people were still asleep. The shaking lasted about 30 to 40 seconds, short, but long enough to destroy an entire urban area. Contemporary sources describe the sound as similar to a mountain erupting, causing the ground to split open and causing catastrophic damage to administrative buildings, mosques, markets, and public baths. A particularly notable geological consequence was a massive landslide in the Kapaz Mountains, blocking the Kurakche River and creating a new lake, Goygol, as well as several smaller lakes, including Maralgol and Zeligol. This is one of the rare recorded cases of a natural lake system forming overnight as a result of a seismic event. Historians of the period, such as Al-Bundari and Armenian historians, described the earthquake as a divine act, a wrath from heaven, noting that the ground seemed to open up and swallow up both people and structures. Aftershocks continued for days, greatly complicating already limited rescue efforts. Panic spread across the region as survivors faced massive loss and displacement. With essential supplies, such as clean water and food, running low, and medical services nearly non-existent, thousands of survivors were forced to flee Ganja, triggering a wave of migration across the South Caucasus that lasted for months. Although there are no official figures, modern scholars estimate that between 30,000 and 50,000 people may have fatalities, perhaps the majority of the city's population at the time. In addition to the human toll, the earthquake caused irreparable cultural damage. Academic centers, libraries, and collections of Islamic manuscripts were engulfed in flames or buried under rubble. Trade routes through Ganja were severely disrupted, affecting the region's economy for years to come. The Ganja earthquake was not only a natural disaster, but also a pivotal moment of political and cultural transformation. As the city fell into crisis, neighboring kingdoms such as Georgia and Armenia began to expand their influence southward, gradually reshaping the power dynamics of the Caucasus. Internally, medieval rulers were forced to implement reforms, from administrative restructuring to changes in urban planning. New buildings were constructed from lighter materials, and the city's layout was redesigned to separate residential and administrative areas, minimizing the risks associated with densely populated areas. Philosophically and theologically, the event marked one of the earliest instances in medieval Islamic history where earthquakes were interpreted from both a spiritual and scientific perspective. Later, Muslim poets, such as Nasimi, referred to the 1139 earthquake as a symbol of divine judgment, but also as a call to humility and virtue. This view was reinforced in the teachings of religious leaders and inspired the creation of memorial shrines, structures that have become a hallmark of South Caucasian religious architecture. One of the most enduring legacies of the event is Lake Goigal, a peaceful, deep blue lake born from the destruction. Today, it is considered by the people of Azerbaijan to be a sacred symbol of renewal and resilience. The surrounding area is designated as Goigal National Park, attracting thousands of visitors each year. In local folklore, stories of the mountain collapsing in divine wrath continue.